Hi, I'm Zane with Zane Engineers Life. So it's Friday story time, and we need you to like and watch to the end because it really helps us out with the algorithms. So, anyway, I thought I'd talk through some tales from back in the manufacturing plant days. So, I go out with one of the engineers one day, and we're walking along the line, and appliances are being made, and there's equipment everywhere, and pieces are going back and forth. And as we walk through the stations, there's maybe 15 or 20 people on this assembly line, and we see this lady who has an amazingly massive amount of tape on her two thumbs. So anyway, she's there, and there's like, 1,000 pounds of tape on each of her thumbs, and that just doesn't look normal. So we stop for a moment and we kind of look at each other and we're like, something's not right here. We need to start asking some questions. So we start poking around and looking through and watching her and observing and seeing the pieces come down the line and trying to figure out what's going on. And then it hits us. Oh, we're at the spot where the actual electrical plug is being put onto the appliance. And what it has is there's a couple of electrical connectors that have a little socket in them, and there's a stud that it has to stick onto, and they're not going on really well. And this poor lady, whose job is to make sure this cord gets attached to this appliance, she's trying to push them on with her thumbs. Well, as you can imagine, metal on skin over a long period of time is super freaking painful. So, what has she done? She's figured out a way to solve the problem. She's put about 2,000 pounds of tape on each thumb, and now she's pushing with these taped thumbs to try to get these pieces to connect. So now we're engineers and we say, well, that's not really normal. That probably needs some help. So what we do is we go back to our area and we start tinkering and pulling pieces and trying to figure out a way. And we go back to the line back and forth a couple times and take some measurements. And we finally figure out, hey, we can go in right before her and put in a spot with a little structure and set up a little cylinder and have it where as the parts come in, we have her basically set them in place. And then this cylinder with a end effector on it pushes the parts together and they click and snap, and now she can take all of this tape off her thumbs. So to expand on that example, we've now solved a problem on one of our main assembly lines. Well, we've got to start thinking about the bigger operation. And we actually had a same appliance being made in another facility. So what we did is we gave them a call and they went out and started looking around kind of in this same spot. Well, they didn't find the lady with the taped thumbs, but what they did find was they found a whole lot of metal filings on the floor in one particular spot. All of these bronze filings were all over the ground and they were kind of shiny and it looked weird. So, what did those engineers do? Well, they actually stopped for a moment, kind of like we did, and started asking questions. Well, the interesting thing is over a period of a couple of days, they actually had a major crash on this assembly line. It literally had stopped and they couldn't figure out what was going on. And come to find out, what had happened is the lady who was normally in this one particular station wasn't there that day. And she hadn't been out in a long time. This lady worked all the time. She happened to be sick. She's out. Suddenly, the assembly line came to a grinding halt. And when they got to their station and they noticed all these filings, they started looking around, started asking questions, started trying to figure out what was up. And they were having the same problem with these connectors. The real problem was that the tolerances were slightly off from the manufacturer and they weren't being checked, and so they weren't fitting well. Well, what did the people in this plant in Louisiana figured out? Well, what the lady had done is she had put an emery cloth, large piece, underneath her workstation, and she was actually filing down the fittings before putting the connector on. Now think about that. She's trying to get something done, right? And there's metal shavings all over the floor now, and it's basically the same problem that we had in the other plant. One lady put tape all over her thumbs, and this lady decided to file the pieces down. The real problem was the parts were bad. And what I want you to do is think about it as an engineer. Your people in the plant are going to be trying to get stuff done. So what we've got to do is we've got to figure out where the actual issues are and what's going on, because we as engineers, we've basically got to save ourselves from ourselves, right? Okay, so on to another story. So I had always heard that industrial engineers were basically incompetent engineers. It was just a little joke, especially in the manufacturing plants. They were kind of like architects, Really good ones were really good, but most of them probably didn't give you a whole lot. So anyway, let me give you a story of an industrial engineer that actually gave a lot. So one day I went out to one of the appliance lines with one of the industrial engineers, one of the IEs, and he had me and a pad of paper and a stopwatch. Well, we started observing this particular line, and I think it was making irons or some other similar appliance. And we started taking notes, and he started clicking the old watch. And I don't know, we were out there a couple hours. And after a period of time, he stopped the line and he said, "Okay, lady in step 7, I want you to put this cord onto the pallet, and it's going to ride along all the way down to station 31 where someone's actually going to put it together." Well, that seems kind of weird, right? What he had found is a slight imbalance in the work that was on the line. And what we had was a person later in the process had a little bit too much work. And we found a spot where we could shift some of that to someone earlier in the work. Basically, we could balance out the line. The cool part is we picked up literally 10% of throughput of the overall line. Well, that's pretty cool, right? And I think it might be where part of the old saying comes from: a good industrial engineer is worth their weight in gold. Now, the moral of the story: just like your life, balance is key to a good assembly line. And little clues give you an idea of what bigger problems might be. Now, as an aside, let's go back to that for a minute, this saying of worth his weight in gold. So let's think about that for a minute. So if dude weighs 180 pounds, that's about 2,800 ounces. And the price of gold today is $1,850 an ounce. So dude would be worth roughly $5.3 million. So that's probably a little bit of an exaggeration, right? It also shows us that we should question some of the old ways, right? The things that we've been told and taught and all these rules of thumb, well, sometimes they just need to be updated. So to summarize, taped thumbs and metal filings on the floor means you need to stop and ask questions as an engineer. Balance is key, and good industrial engineers are hard to find. And finally, question what you hear until you know for yourself. So again, let it play to the end. I'm Zane with Zane Engineers Life, and we'll make you better.